Remember, please hit like and subscribe for me. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go. Hi everyone, today's Friday, December the 19th, and this is the Moneyball Morning Report for the Benzinga Pro platform. My name is Anne-Marie Band, charts by TrendSpider and Gamma Flows by MentorQ. For those of us that maybe are just looking at Gamma Flows for the first time, or we're writing snarky notes in the comments, please remember that these are simply areas of interest, and it is where traders have positioned themselves ahead of time. Now, here's something super interesting. If I sell a call and I sell a put, what happens is I collect a credit, right? So that credit actually gives me a buffer so that I can actually expand under these walls and still make money, just so long as it doesn't expand up and over what I collected on the inside. Now, that also being said, we've got put support that is well down here, 6,700, the big call wall, 7,000. So we know they're jammed up in between those two ledges, and we can see the flows trapping us in the main area between 68.80, 68.90, and 67.70. So it's about 110 points. And where we can see at the end of yesterday's trading day, this is where the 0 DTE traders have positioned themselves into the morning. All right, as we know, 0 DTEs do move during the course of the day, but the biggest positioning sits at the end of the prior trading day, because that's how these traders like to collect their premium. All right, so that being said, we can see that we are caught between 6,800, where the 0 DTE put wall is, and 68.65, where the call wall is. Now, of course, we know those are simply regions, and we're going to pay attention to that. Take a look at this. If we're staring it down, we might go, hey, there could be a pretty big rally on the end of this if the traders can get up and over the 0 DTE wall. If they don't, and this red bar here is a resistance area, and it's building a ton of support here. So what are we staring down? Where has inventory accumulated overnight? It is between 68.19, maybe 68. Yeah, 68.19, all the way to the anchored VWAP at 68.35. Notice it's breaking out. So we're going to use one of those, right? And we're going to put our range at the top of that. We can see that we're getting close to the edge, and wouldn't you know it, sellers are sitting in that zone. This little red pocket here also represents sellers, but you got to look at trend. And what are we seeing? We're seeing higher lows, but lower highs. So this is the wedge we have to get ourselves out of. What is inventory currently sitting at right now at 5 a.m. in the morning, 5:30? It's long. Inventory's long going into this area. That means they're going to want to correct. Where will they likely correct? If there's more upward flow, they're going to come into that anchored VWAP event at 68.37 or so, 68.35. So watch for that zone for buyers to show up if you want to anticipate more upward flow. Of course, this is my suspicion. We're going to move up into these expiration events, and indeed, because the VIX is expiring after the broad indices, we could see some reflexive action after the fact. But as it sits, we've got something that looks like upward flow to me. Where will my thoughts about more upward action be invalidated? The break of 68.20. If that 68.20 gets broken, I'm going to be concerned about picking up longs on the dips. All right. So by default, that means if I come into 68.20 and I start holding it, I'm going to make a pretty nice buy zone because it's all the inventory that we collected over the pre-market hours. All right. Value area low, 68.23. Value area high is 68.74. That should be our range. I would not be surprised to see a little bit of upward pressure. It will be a Friday, but I also would not be surprised to see it fade, right? And if it does fade and we break first the 0 DTE put wall, and then where we saw all the aggressive inventory accumulation in yesterday's pre-market action, we can see it's a really wide range that goes all the way down to 67.74 and begins right at about 6,800. But that 6,800 is a very important level. All right, that's what we want to watch. A bit chatty there, I apologize. Okay, let's take a look at the NQ. What we do see is the same sort of thing. Upward trending formations from underneath, lower trending formations from above. So we got price compression here. Broke just outside of this region here. So it does look like it's breaking to the north. We could see a little bit more of that. Where has the trading been pretty active? I think the inventory has really been collecting. It's pretty wide, right? A little noisy. It's been collecting since 25,200 all the way up to 25,300. So that's a 100-point range. If we expand that upward, it's going to put us into this high volume region of 25,424. If we expand to the downside, we're going to see 25,070 or so. Looks to me like we've got a fairly solid inventory line sitting right there at 25,068. As a trader, we want to really be careful about that edge. The sellers, I think, will become much more active if we lose this area of high consolidation in the opening range, and that is the first gamma level. That's 25,200. So you want to watch for behavior there. Remember, everybody's in an argument over that sort of thing, so we go from 25,200 all the way up to 25,400. Would not be surprised. If we break through this 25,420, we've got the 0 DTE call wall. Yeah, and the major call wall at 25,500. Wouldn't be surprised to see that either. Okay, so that being said, we've got ourselves a range. It does look like the traders are trying to hold the floor here. Dips are likely to be buys. You just don't want to hang on if it loses the floor. Just cut and run. And if you get aggressive about your entry and you decide, hey, I think I want to enter at the point of control, which is this pink line here, just realize that your risk might just be a little bit wider, and you might want to wait for it to actually recover up over the prior day's anchored VWAP, which is 25,260, if price action does not fade. Remember, we should see inventory correction. It's very common when our overnight formations are long. Inventory correction is something that we see. It comes later sometimes and not all the way. Notice it stayed very long. Inventory here shot up and then pulled back before moving to the upside. My suspicion is that we pull back prior to the open of the day and then move to the north. Let's see what we have going on for Friday. personal income and outlays, and then existing home sales and consumer sentiment. So a couple of things that could actively move us. So you want to watch out for those time frames. Let's see if there are any other levels I want to talk to you about. Anchored VWAP from the prior day, 25,136. And then you can see all of this inventory just really accumulating here. So watch out for that. Let's take a look at micro Bitcoin. Wow, that is quite the range. But you could see sellers here up at the top. I am going to remove that segment and give us another one that looks a little bit more relevant. We are breaking through that. This is very interesting. Wide bottoming range. Let's expand that a little. You know what? Inventory is sitting in a different space here. We don't want to, that's going to clutter things up. So the big call wall up here at 90,000, it continues to get moved down. It was at 92. We can see clear resistance there. Now it's at 90. Let's see where the put wall was. Okay, the put wall is still at 75,000. So we know that these traders are expecting downside pressure. Here's the thing. If it breaks out and we breach these walls, remember, if I'm short calls, it means that I want to be underneath this area. So if price action expands, I'm going to have to buy the index so that my delta is neutral. And so if it breaches this zone and continues with positive momentum, we're going to have ourselves a pretty hot run, because the price action here is relatively aggressive, right? The price action here is, we can have all kinds of moves. So watch out for that. What we do see is that every single major spike is getting sold. BOJ gave the event out. I don't know if that's going to shift this. We do know that Bitcoin has been affected by a carry trade adjustment. Maybe it changes, but I don't think that it actually does. All right. So, and people are not afraid to short it anymore. All right. Levels to watch. Support, 85,000. Resistance, 90,000. If you're bullish, wait for 85,000 to hold and take it. Take some profit on the way up. If you're bearish, wait for the rejection of 90 and then take the rotation down. A lot of you hivers are doing really well with your analysis, and so absolutely love seeing that. Let's go to the crude futures. So we had a State of the Union address. I think oil faded dramatically after its first move up. Everybody was waiting for him to say something about Venezuela. He did not. And so we're back down in the same pocket. Here's the thing. I still think that we are building a floor, and that floor at 55 is pretty important. I mean, it's pretty important because it's sort of that line in the sand that these producers need in order to at least do something with the industry. All right. So point of control, $55.77. The put wall remains at 55. The call wall is at 70. No, that is the one max. That's 57. The call wall is right up here at 56. Now notice, this call wall has been sitting in these zones. These 0DT call walls have been sitting in these zones and moving up and back down and up and back down intraday. That's why it makes the most sense to look at the ones that are printed after the end of the day relative to the big call walls and the big put walls. The big put wall is still up at 61. I suspect that moves in after next week, but we are still sitting in a region that shows breakout action above 56 into the next area of resistance at 56.34. This does not look like a very enticing range to trade. And indeed, after this move, the trend is still downward, right? We need to make a higher low here. We need not to test this put wall. And it looks like that anchored VWAP of 55.50 is going to be that floor. If it loses that edge, I would not trade oil long. I am waiting for this thing to actually double bottom and then move to the top of the range. I do not trust it in any kind of long fashion at the moment. Even though I think it's being manipulated downward, I would not think to buy it here. All right, gold. Gold broke to a new high. Isn't that right? Break to a new high? Yeah, it did by a couple of ticks. So I stand corrected in terms of the big motion here. Do we have a double top on the daily? That's the storyboard. My thought is this. If it breaks up over this wall at 4,415, it's probably going to have another squeeze up, right? Because a lot of people are looking at this double top. So don't get all excited trading this in a topping formation. That would be the first thing I would say. The second thing would be, if it does break to the north, make sure you collapse into very tiny time frames and make sure it's making at least higher lows. If it starts wicking up top, making higher highs, just trim your gains and leave with what you've got. It simply is not worth the risk. Mike Bellafiore has a really couple of great tweets on what this market is doing. He's one of the senior guys at SMB Capital, and he was just talking about what his traders are doing to manage profitability, and that is getting in and getting out quickly because there are so many wicks in the market. So what are we staring down? We have the 0DTE put wall at 43.80, and we're under that. We need to be above it. And the call wall is 44.15. And so these are very likely to move during the day. But what it's telling us is that they're jammed up thinking, I'm moving this put wall up and we're going to have a topping formation. So if they're wrong, if this is not a topping formation, you're going to see a big move, because they're all thinking it is, a big move to the downside like we saw, 4 or 5 days ago. All right. Support ledge that we really want to consider is 4,325. We lose that zone, we've got ourselves some downside pressure. This is a very nasty price action space. I mean, literally, it's hideous. Truly. It's absolutely hideous. Let's remove this one. Hang on. And let's clone this one so we can have a parallel situation and see where we lost the lines. So it looks like here, ton of inventory being collected between 4,355 and 4,370. Deep dips still getting bought, but this is a broad sideways pattern that absolutely looks atrocious. It really, really does. Let's see where the walls are. The big call wall is the same as the 0DTE. That's at 44.15. The put wall is down here at 4,100. So that feels pretty safe. A ton of support sitting around 42.40. And then, of course, this 43.24. Pretty important. So be careful. I don't like that chart either today. That looks horrible. Taking a look at SPY, trend line formation. They've got a trend line break. Higher lows, lower highs, but it certainly looks like a floor is being held at around 675. If we hold the 675, 678 to 680, next line's in the sand. Okay, so that's what we're staring down here. Where's the line that says, hey, you don't want to break this one? I suspect that is 675. If it loses 675, buying the dips underneath there, they get a little dicey all the way down to the one-day min, which is at 671. And day before yesterday, really deep. We did fill the gap and moved all the way to the top. We only corrected about halfway and never filled the formation in pre-market. And so it could be that the traders come all the way down and then bounce, but I still suspect that the dips are going to get bought. What we want to do is make sure that you don't sit around looking for something to go long and stay long when you've got a formation that looks like this. When you're underneath the VWAP and you've got all of these wicks, that's just not a good space, okay? It's likely to continue downward. All right, everyone, take care, and I will see you today. I am on Top Step TV at, I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll see each other on Market Kickoff on Sunday night. All right, everyone, take care.